Honestly, it is probably hip-hop's most enduring mystery. In 1996, hip-hop legend Tupac was shot and killed. Police have never figured out who is responsible. Today on the podcast, you'll hear about the unlikely breakthrough that led to a charge in Tupac's murder. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, there are events that have captured our hearts and minds over the decades, but few are as tragic as the murders of the notorious B.I.G. and Tupac Shakur. These are two of the greatest rap acts of all time, killed in two separate drive-by shootings that decades later both remain unsolved. This past Friday, news broke that Las Vegas police charged a man named Duane Davis with Tupac's murder. That news shook the internet, honestly. Commotion regular Ian Steaman is here with me now. Ian, welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks for having me back.
Of course. Listen, you were on the show recently to talk about the new Dear Mama doc. That's a doc about Tupac and his mother, Afeni Shakur. What was your reaction when you heard about this charge?
Some surprise, I think. It's been so long. It's been 27 years since this incident happened.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of rumors and wild theories and speculations around what happened. And for there to be an announcement that they have essentially solved the case and think they know what happened and issuing an indictment and an arrest was pretty surprising, I think. Yeah,
I mean, you know, there's something to be said about the fact that Tupac's murder sort of reigns over hip hop, right? Like,
that's right.
There's something of a mythology over it. We don't know who did it. You know, it's sort of spurred all these conspiracy theories. It's just kind of been this thing that, you know, it's just there that sort of remains unsolved. The idea that we're here now and there's some even evolution in this case, that feels kind of surreal, doesn't it?
That's right. I mean, it's interesting, actually. I mean, the Nevada police, when they made the announcement, they said that the major kind of details of the case had been known to them from almost the onset. They just never really had the evidence to issue an indictment or to take it to a grand jury. So, you know, most of the players that were involved, there's been theories around them for a long time. It's just finally now we have all the pieces together, and the way that came to be is kind of shocking as well.
So police have a suspect in custody. Like I said, his name is Duane Davis. What do we know about Duane Davis's connection to Tupac?
So Duane Davis is also known as Keefe D. He is a so-called shot caller or leader of the Southside Compton Crips. They have been on and off involved. Well, the Crips and the Bloods obviously have had a long antagonistic history within LA street culture.
In hip-hop too. Yeah.
That's right. And Death Row Records, which is the label that Tupac was signed to, was run by Marion Suge Knight. Marion Suge Knight is a well-known affiliate of the Piru Mob Bloods. And there's a whole story that leading up to it, but there was an altercation between an affiliate of Death Row Records and Orlando Anderson, who was long suspected of being the actual shooter. Orlando Anderson is Keefe D's nephew.
Mm-hmm. And he is never admitted to killing Tupac, but he's maintained that he witnessed the shooting, right? Keefe D.
Keefe D, yes. I mean, he's been on numerous interviews and even within his own book, spoke to the fact that he was there, that he witnessed the shooting, and then he's kind of played coy and cited the street code as a reason for why he couldn't get into more detail as to what exactly had happened.
Yeah, we should say this is not the first time that Duane Davis has caught the police's attention around Tupac's murder. He appeared on an episode of the BET show Death Row Chronicles. That show references the Death Row Records, which is, as you said, the label that Tupac was signed to. What did Duane Davis say or do on that show?
He admitted to being in the car the night of the shooting. He admitted that the shots that killed Tupac came from the car that he was in. I think he even may have admitted that who was actually sitting in the back seats where the shots came from. And at that point, he didn't really want to offer up any additional information.
It's an extraordinary thing to say to a TV show, to be honest with
Absolutely.
you. Right? Yeah.
I mean, there's some kind of theories around why he was so open with those details even.
We should say Tupac's unsolved murder has kind of created this own separate economy, right? There's been films, there's been documentaries, online interviews, not to mention, the long rumored, the fan sightings, like, oh my God, I saw Tupac in Mexico or whatever, all these sort of conspiracy theories. What do you make of the way the legacy of this murder has continued to resonate within the hip hop zeitgeist?
I mean, listen, this Tupac, it was a giant within the culture and the music. His musical legacy obviously lives on, and even his personal and philosophical legacy continues to kind of resonate within the culture.
Yeah.
And he was so young when he died. He was 25 years old. So there's just the mystery around the death, how impactful he was, how few answers people have had up until this moment. It all kind of just generates kind of discussion and kind of theories around what happened and why.
There's that thing that you just said. He was 25 years old when he died. The idea that he had become one of hip-hop's greatest acts of all time by the age of 25. And the thing that we always try to do is like try to project into the future, try to say, what else could he have done with his career, right? Like that's a part of the mythology here.
That's right.
Like,
yeah.
What else could Tupac have done? Of course, there's been so many posthumous albums. He's put out so many albums after his death. His estate has anyway. What do you make of hip hop's legend, sort of Tupac's legend within hip hop and the way that he's kind of evolved over the years?
Well, I mean, going back to the Dear Mama doc that we talked about a few weeks back, I mean, they were obviously grooming him for something bigger than hip hop and being an artist.
Yeah.
The music was really a means to an end. He had a really radical philosophy about serving the black community and taking on the mantle and the legacy of the Black Panthers, which his mother was a key figure within. Mm-hmm. So the music was really a vehicle to communicate that message. So I like to think that if he had lived and continued to kind of be a creative public figure, that he would have segued more into the political side of things.
Right. This development, this arrest, this charge sort of brings us one step closer, maybe, to solving one of the biggest unsolved murders in pop music history. When you see a development like this, do you feel like, there is hope for us in terms of finding who's responsible for also like Biggie's murder? Or do you kind of anticipate that the justice system will not deliver in the end, do you think?
I'd like to be optimistic about it. I think a lot of people have kind of given up hope that anything would happen in the Tupac case, and obviously due to some extraordinary circumstances, but also the fact that contrary to public opinion, the police were continuing to work on the case. It had gone cold, then new avenues of investigation opened up, and they kept at it and came to a solution. So hopefully the same thing can happen in the Biggie case.
Ian, we're going to follow this as we continue to get updates from it. But in the meantime, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Thank you as always.
Of course, Ian Steaman is a former music industry insider turned TV writer and a regular right here on Commotion. Hi there, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. The show you are listening to is called Commotion. Got a bit of an update for you, which is that nature appears to be healing. Okay, Hollywood writers are returning to work after 5 months on strike. Members of the Writers Guild of America are voting this week to ratify their new 3-year agreement. And late night shows are back at it. Late night shows have returned to air. Here's John Oliver's take on the writer's strike.
This strike happened for good reasons. Our industry has seen its workers severely squeezed in recent years. You've probably seen stories about writers and actors whose work you may even recognise routinely not making enough to qualify for health insurance or afford basic needs. So the Writers Guild went on strike and thankfully won. But it took a lot of sacrifices from a lot of people to achieve that. And while I'm happy that they eventually got a fair deal and immensely proud of what our union accomplished, I'm also furious that it took the studios 148 days to achieve a deal that they could have offered on day one. But hopefully, this may encourage others, from auto workers to Starbucks baristas to healthcare providers, whether they are in unions or would like to be, to find power in each other.
A deal they could have offered on day effing one. That is John Oliver, incensed and outraged. We're going to parse out the details of the deal and look ahead of this new chapter in Hollywood. Kathryn VanArendonk is here. Anthony Q. Farrell is here. Anthony, Kathryn, what's good, y'all? How's it going?
Hey, so excited to be
Hello.
here.
Listen,
Yeah.
when I said nature is healing, you both just had this giant smile from ear to ear, which is just delightful because I know, Anthony, you're like, I just want to make some TV. And Kathryn, you're like, I just want to watch some TV. And now
I do. I do.
You look so emotional. Like your face is like, I finally get to return to some of the TV that I love so much. Let's get into the details here. The writer's strike started in May. For most of that time, the union and studios have been at a stalemate. Then last week, this new contract comes together in a matter of days. Dude, what happened?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Which dude are you referring to?
I was referring to Kathryn, but you know what? If you want to take it,
No. Go. Kathryn,
go.
You start. Yeah.
Okay. So it has taken a long, long time to get to this point. And part of the reason it has taken a long, long time to get to this point is the studios very much did not care that there was going to be a strike on for a long, long time. It played to their advantage in some really gruesome, cruel ways, because the longer the strike was on, the less money they were spending on productions that were, happening at that particular moment. And unfortunately, the streaming industry in particular and entertainment more broadly is in a place where the economics have not been so great, and to have several months where you are able to reduce your expenditures plays in a short term pretty well for what their books looks like.
Right.
And so they have not been particularly motivated to make a deal. And as a result, all of these writers have been out of work.
Suddenly, you didn't have to spend anything for 3 months or so, 4 months or so, and then you're like, okay, now let's make a deal. Again, cannot be stressed enough, as John Oliver said. Basically, the deal could have been made very early on in the negotiations. Anthony, the some of the things that the union was fighting for, we're talking about streaming residuals, we're talking about artificial intelligence. Those are new challenges in Hollywood. They just didn't exist before. How big of a deal is this moment for Hollywood, do you think?
It's quite big. Like I'll harken back to the 2007 strike. We didn't get a lot of gains in that strike, not as much as we did in this strike. But what we did get was we got a toehold on streaming and new media. Having a little bit of a right to residuals in those things back in 2007 when they weren't actually a thing, it meant that we could actually ask for increases rather than asking for a share of the pie, right? So now that we have our toehold in these areas, as time goes on, there's a good chance you're going to see that these things are going to start blowing up in a different way than they are today, because technology advances and these things move forward very, very quickly.
Right.
Having a toehold in those areas makes it easier for us to negotiate specifics. Like, we're not going to be fighting for a say. We'll be fighting for what kind of say we have. Does that make sense? Like, I think that's... You're not
starting from scratch, right? Like, you're sort of starting from already a position and saying, okay, is this position fair or not fair, as opposed to saying, should we have a role in this at all? Kathryn, let's talk about one of those big sticking points. So, like, that's the one that Anthony just mentioned. How TV writers get paid for streamers, for like big hit shows on streaming networks. How is that going to change because of this deal?
Right. So the way a lot of the deals have been working for streaming for writers is that they have gotten paid a little bit more upfront for deals that they are making for streaming programs, because there then is no residual structure afterwards. There's no model where it's like, we played a repeat of your episode, at 4 p.m. several months later, and so we're going to pay you for the fact that we re-aired that, right?
Right.
And so in the beginning, that felt like, oh, I'm getting a little bit more money up front to sort of compensate me for the fact that I'm not getting residuals farther down the line. Except that little tiny bit of money that they got paid more upfront is vastly underpaid compared with the success of if you wrote for a show like Wednesday or Stranger Things, some of these enormous hits on huge platforms. Had you actually been paid something closer to a residual, you would have been much, much better compensated for that work. So what has changed is they have introduced this bar of a 20% threshold, where if something like 20% of a platform's viewership sees your program, you then get a bonus.
Right.
There's still a lot of questions about that. We don't know how many shows actually go above that threshold. So we have no idea whether only 2 shows are ever going to qualify for that. We don't know how those bonuses are going to work. And we, the public, don't actually get to know right away what that means, like which of those shows are the ones getting paid those bonuses. But just like Anthony said, it is a foothold. In future contracts, they can adjust that to see how that will work for people.
I do want to stress to people listening that like the idea of residuals being one of the ways that you fund your life, it just used to be one of the main ways that writers used to make money. I mean, Tom Werner, made so much money off the reruns of The Cosby Show and Roseanne, he bought the Boston Red Sox. Like, let's just contextualize how much money you can make from residuals, because if a show is on the air and it has this like massive sort of successful life, then you too can sort of earn a pretty good living. But when it comes to streaming, the show goes out once, and then you don't really know how many people are watching it and when they're watching it. Anthony, for so long, streamers have not shared a lot of data in terms of like who and how many people are watching. They may give you like, hey, here's like a list of like the top 10 shows on the platform, but the actual number of people watching is a mystery. With this deal, the WGA is going to receive some of that data. They're going to receive it in aggregate. It's not quite sort of like a breakdown show by show. Why is this transparency important in terms of just like on the way to learning how many people are watching your shows?
It'll just make the deals that we ask for stronger in the future, right? Like, I think as someone who has done deals where I'm going to get back end money and have not seen that back end money, like you can get creative with numbers and tell someone like, we didn't make any money on this show, so we don't owe you any back end. Like, that's how these things work, right? So this whole thing with 20%, like it's all still nebulous. They can make the numbers dance how they want to dance. Like, they've got fancy accountants that are going to do all these things. But what the WGA now has is they have access to that data, right? So they can't share it wide, but what they can do is they can use that information to decide how they're going to move forward with their future negotiations, what they're specifically going to ask for. Having this information now makes us stronger in that way. I think there will be a few people that get better residuals because of it, and I think that's fantastic, but I don't think it's going to help all of the writers the way that it's kind of like being played. But what it will eventually help all the writers, because we'll use this information. And as someone who I receive residuals from working on The Office, from working on The Thundermans. I still receive residuals from a 10-minute series I wrote called Fred the Show. I wrote 1 episode of that show. I still get little residuals from that show 15 years later. So like, these are important to keep, people alive, keep them taking care of their families. So
Anthony, you about to buy the Red Sox or what? You're not going to buy the Red Sox with these residuals.
I can buy some Red Sox.
All right. Kathryn, you know what? That's a good one. That's why you're a TV writer. That's why they pay you these residuals. I loved it. Kathryn, one of the big stories we were hearing about is AI. Know, the AI sort of loomed large over these negotiations as well. One big part of the deal is the protections against the use of artificial intelligence. What exactly was won there in the deal?
Right. And so AI is a classic example of what Anthony was talking about, where it's like, we have this suspicion that in the future, AI is going to be a huge part of how writers' lives are impacted. But right now, it's this big, nebulous, terrifying, Terminator situation. And we're just wondering how we're going to stop it from taking over the world. And so what was put into place are primarily financial protections for writers, which is to say they did not bar studios from using AI, from trying to, create scripts, create ideas, from scraping writers' data. Actually, that is a big point of contention that still has not been fully ironed out. Yeah. But what they have done is stopped a studio from saying, hey, a computer wrote this. Could you just like polish it up so that it works? And also, we're not going to pay you the way we would pay you if you had come up with this idea yourself.
Right.
Right.
When this strike started, Anthony, something about AI was framed as an existential threat to writers. It was like, this is not just, hey, here's some new technology that studios might use. It's like, this is a deep and existential threat to the way that we do this job. What do you think has changed with this deal? Or is that threat still out there?
The threat's still out there. I think it's a slightly different threat now, though. So what this deal has done, it's taken AI out of the hands of the producers and put it into the hands of the writers. We're allowed to use it as a tool.
Right.
Great. As a Black man, as a writer who has been marginalized in this industry in the past, I fear that it will allow certain writers who are more privileged to cut out writers who are, marginalized.
Yeah.
And use AI instead of paying, writers like BIPOC writers who are trying to get into the business. Like, they can use AI and not pay them. And so it's still a threat to parts of the business. And
right.
I'm still keeping my eye on this because it's one of those things that we've kind of wrestled it away from the hands of the producers, but it's still in the hands of people. There's still internal struggles in the WGA with using a writer's room versus not using a writer's room. Like,
right.
These are still questions that we're talking about internally. And so having the AI still available to us and access to it, it's going to create different questions that I'm sure I'll be asking very, very soon.
Well, so we've been talking about the resolution of the writer's strike because the writers are going to vote on the deal this week. And that's really exciting after 4.5 months of being on strike. Kathryn, the actors are also on strike. That strike is still ongoing. The actors returned to the bargaining table yesterday. I guess return to the bargaining table is like a loose phrase. They haven't bargained since the strike began in July.
That's right.
Is there any hope that negotiation is going to wrap up as quickly as the writers did?
There is reason to hope because it does seem like the studios now, then they know writers are back. They are ready to get back into production. It does feel like the mood is very much like, let's get this done with and just sort of be past this long strike summer.
Yeah.
However, I have seen a lot of people, and I think it's correct, the issues that the actors are facing, particularly related to AI, are existential, but they are different. The language of them looks different than it does for a writer. And I think it's going to be important, which, all of the SAG actors are aware of. It's going to be important to not rush to a deal because this is the moment to really push to make sure that they are able to get as many protections as they possibly can.
Anthony, we've been talking a lot about Hollywood because that's where this deal was struck. You're based in Toronto, man. You're making shows like Shelved. You're making shows like Run the Burbs. How does this new deal resonate for people who are in the Writers Guild of Canada, do you think?
We are about to go into negotiations with the CMPA at the end of this year. Now, a lot of the issues that American writers face were issues that Canadian writers were dealing with for the last 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So seeing them, when Canadians have had issues with not having enough writers, not having enough weeks, they've now placed minimums on those things with the WGA and the AMPTP. Can we get something close to that? We're going to start because it's become contracted and negotiated in America.
Yeah,
we can hopefully make some gains up here as well. So things like that are going to be questions that come up with the Writers Guild of Canada, and hopefully we'll get to a place where we can make things even better for the writers up here because there are definitely similar issues that we're struggling with.
Kathryn, I got about 30 seconds left. Listen, for a lot of years, people have been talking about how there's been so much television made. People called this era peak TV. Now, folks are like, peak TV might be over. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, peak TV is over. The peak came and it went, but that's also not the worst thing. Peak TV was a nightmare for critics. Sorry, that's just my own personal perspective. But it was also bad for viewers. People had no idea what was out there, and the correction is going to be really, really, really hard for writers and for actors. That's going to be miserable. But in the long run, there was no way to sustain this level of production, and I'm hopeful that the future will be better.
Thank God for no more, 500 pilots in 1 month. That's going to be, I'm grateful for that. In the meantime, Anthony, Kathryn, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course.
Yeah.
Anthony Q. Farrell is one of this country's top writers and showrunners. He's a member of the American Writers Union, the WGA, and the Canadian Screenwriters Guild. And Kathryn VanArendonk is a TV critic for Vulture. And that is it for the show today. Listen, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I'm going to be back here tomorrow. And you know what? I hope that you're going to be back here tomorrow, too. I'll see you then.